Whether you're just starting out in Hogwarts Legacy or you're a complete veteran to the game, these 25 tips to dominate Hogwarts Legacy are certainly going to help you. You'll be able to learn something new here, or you'll be able to change something that you are maybe doing wrong. And these tips really do vary. These may be some basic gameplay mechanic tips, or some of them may actually be some hidden details in the game that will help you significantly progress within Hogwarts Legacy. Or maybe this will just help you complete a certain mission in the game. All of these are going to be some really helpful tips. Some of them, of course, you may already know, but others, there's definitely going to be some you don't know. So yeah, this video is going to be 25 tips to dominate Hogwarts Legacy. So yeah, let's get straight into it. Tip number 1 is to adjust your camera acceleration to slow down the general rotation. This is something that I would definitely do, and generally speaking, just tweak your camera settings. Chances are there's going to be something you might want to change. Generally speaking, the sensitivity for some is either too high or too low, depending on whether you're using a keyboard and mouse or a controller. So definitely just go into the camera settings and change a few things, since there's definitely going to be something there you might want to change. So I would just say to go ahead and take a look, since it will do no harm, to be honest. Tip number 2 is to learn to properly use the map. There's quite a few hidden details to the map, such as fast traveling to certain locations, so definitely make sure that you know how to properly use the map and you know how to navigate it easily. So yeah, definitely make sure that you learn how to use the map in Hogwarts Legacy. Tip number 3 is to use the left and right button to switch between Hogwarts and Hogsmeade on the map. This sort of links in with tip number 2, since if you learn how to use the map, then you'll know tip number 3. But yeah, a tip is to make sure that you are switching between the different regions in the game, since obviously you might be in a mission where you need to switch out of Hogsmeade. You need to make sure at the top of the map that you are doing that in order to be able to find the location or set a waypoint. So tip number 4 is to zoom out to find level of enemies within a specific region. Make sure, obviously, once again with the map, just make sure that you are using it well. Tip number 5 is to make sure that you understand that the enemy difficulty will scale with your level. If you are level 40 and an area is level 10 to 30, the enemy difficulty will be 30 because that's the closest. But if you are level 11 in a 20 to 40 area, the enemy difficulty will of course be 20, since that is the closest to your level. Just make sure you know that before, maybe getting to the maximum level possible before going into that certain area, since that's just a waste of time and something you don't need to do. Tip number 6 and 7 sort of link to tip number 1, but here you're making sure you adjust the camera sensitivity and the aiming acceleration, since of course that's something you're going to want to do, like I mentioned with the camera settings. So yeah, tip number 6 and 7 is to adjust the camera sensitivity and the aiming acceleration. The 8th tip is to change the camera relative targeting. Turn off to look at other enemies without targeting, something that you might want to do that will change up the gameplay a bit, so definitely look into that. Tip number 9 is that you can easily change the difficulty mid-fight. If you're finding it too hard, this is something you can do. Say you are really struggling to complete a fight, you can change the difficulty of the game. This will improve your damage whilst lowering the enemy's damage. Something pretty simple there, and just an easy way to be able to get through missions if you're really struggling. Of course, some may see that as sort of cheating, but at the same time, if you're really stuck on a mission and you can't get out of it, then you're probably going to need to do that. And tip number 10 is to use Wingardium Leviosa to pick up objects and drop them. And tip number 11, 12 and 13 are pretty much the same, where you're using Wingardium Leviosa to throw objects around, to throw explosive barrels, and to pick up enemies. All things that you can do with that spell. Definitely a spell to make sure that you know how to use, and definitely, a spell that you remember how to use. You want to make sure you're remembering to use it, since of course if you don't end up using it, then it's never going to be useful. So yeah, tip number 10, 11, 12 and 13 is to make sure that you are using Wingardium Leviosa to pick up objects and drop them, to throw objects around, to throw explosive barrels, and to pick up enemies. Tip number 14 is to instantly skip lockpicking with the auto solve mechanic. Make sure you're using that. It's a very easy way to skip the lockpicking, which can be a bit of a faff. Of course, you might want to do it the first time just so you can see the general gameplay of it, but to be honest, I would just skip it, since it's, a bit of a faff and not really needed. Tip number 15 is that you can change the story difficulty, which does remove lockpicking completely. Of course, this links to tip number 14, but it's something definitely worth noting that you can change the story difficulty, and by lowering it, then you will be completely removing lockpicking. Tip number 16 is to use the map to find all the Demiguise statues in each area. You need this to eventually get the Alaharama spell to skip lockpicks, something definitely worth noting there. Tip number 17 is that as soon as you can start finding Demiguise statues, do it. You will upgrade your spells and it will make life a lot easier. Make sure you are finding these statues, since it's just going to make everything so much easier. So yeah, make sure that you do them and it will upgrade your spells. So yeah, that is why it makes it so much easier. By upgrading your spells, you're going to make the combat easier, which is going to make defeating enemies easier, which is going to make completing missions easier. It's going to make everything absolutely easier without having to lower the difficulty or anything like that. So yeah, make make sure you are finding those statues. The 18th tip is something that links with the 17th tip, and is that it will also help you unlock more locations, which will give you a lot more loot. Something to notice with finding those statues, and yeah, they will all link together nicely. This is once again linked with tip number 19. They're mainly placed in the open world rather than Hogwarts, so you don't need to search every room in the castle. Just keep an eye out in the open world when you're on a certain mount, or of course you're flying on your broom, or maybe you're just exploring the world on foot. That is something I would really take a note of, since obviously you aren't going to be finding them in Hogwarts, or at least most of them, so definitely don't spend your time just walking around the entire school, since that's just a complete waste of time and something you don't need to do since they're not there. So yeah, really don't do that since they're not going to be there. So make sure you're just checking the open world, or just when you're in the open world, keep an eye out for them. You maybe don't want to go just exploring the whole open world specifically looking for them, since obviously the open world in Hogwarts Legacy is absolutely massive, and you're going to be spending all of your time just looking for a, certain statue that's going to be very hard to find in that massive open world. So I would just say when you're out in it, maybe going to a certain mission or doing a certain side quest, then just make sure you're keeping a small eye out for them. Tip number 20 is something that most people know is a feature, but always forget to use, and this is that you can switch to the day and night cycle by using the wait button in the menu. When you are just in the map, you can actually wait some time by selecting a certain button, which you can see at the bottom of your screen, and then it will switch from either day or night. If you are at night, then it will switch you to day, and if you're in the day, then it will switch you to the night. Something useful, since for example in the common room, if you want to see some activity there, you need to wait till the daytime. So what I did once when I wanted to see and explore the common room for myself, I just went into the menu, I selected the wait button, and then of course it took me to the daytime, and I was able to see everyone around. Hogwarts is going to be very, very quiet at night, so yeah, you want to spend most of your time there in the day in my opinion, but of course maybe you prefer it at night, so when it switches to day, you're going to wait out some time and wait for it to be night. Something that you definitely need to use, or maybe not need to use, but want to use, and chances are you knew it was there, but forgot to use it. Tip number 21 is that you can only do this outside of combat, so something worth noting there. If you're in combat and want to wait for it to maybe be day, you're finding it hard at night time, well unfortunately you're not going to be able to do that, so make sure there are not any enemies nearby. Tip number 22 is to use the map to collect all chests in the area. All the chests will show up on your map, so make sure you're utilizing it to find these chests. Tip number 23 is to use the map to find various activities. All across your map, no matter your location, you'll be able to find loads and loads of activities that you can travel to. Some of these you might be able to fast travel to if you've been nearby, but other ones you might have to travel there yourself. But either way, you'll be able to find various activities on the map without having to just go and explore the world for yourself. That will be on your map, so yeah, make sure you are checking that out. Tip number 24 is to use the white dots on your map to complete the field guide. You want to complete that field guide at some point, especially if you want to aim to complete everything in the game, so make sure you're utilizing the white dots on your map to be able to complete that. And now we're on to the 25th and the final tip for this video, and this is if you come across a beast, use your bag to capture them, so of course that's going to be useful later down the line. And there we go, those are 25 tips to utilize within Hogwarts Legacy. Some of those are some basic beginner tips, but some of those are actually some really useful gameplay tips that you probably didn't even know about. And that does just about wrap up things here. Now, I have done a video a bit like this, but instead I'm going over 10 specific beginner tips, and if you're interested in watching that, then the link to that video is on the screen now, and you can go ahead and join me over there.